apropos My Lai, when Michael Yule and I went there in 2010, we had Mr. Doe with us, and we went to the My Lai Museum, and we were really depressed afterwards. And so Doe, who was raised in this area, took pity on us, and he took us to the My Lai Grammar School. I don't even read that. And he said, just go on to the compound there. And just as we went on, the school let out, and all these kids came pouring out of the school, and just swarmed us, and were laughing at us, and smiling at us, peace signs. They'd never seen, there were a couple of elephants walking around the hill. They'd never seen anybody our size, right? You've gotten thinner, but I've gotten bigger.
You had shorts on. Did you have shorts on?
You had shorts on.
You had shorts on.
No, I think I had.
I see the leg there.
No, I think it's kids.
So they were jumping, they were all over us, and they were just pushing on each other, and that was great. And life goes on, right?
Is the U.S. mentioned any kind of treatment of the people who live near Da Nang and
Excellent question. No, so the U.S. is committed to doing these two hotspots, right? Da Nang and Bien Hoa. They've made no commitments to any of the other smaller hotspots, and they have made no commitments to helping the Vietnamese people. Senator Leahy, 2 years ago, as his assistant put it, stole $25 million and handed it to, he's on the Appropriations Committee, so he can like stick money here and there now and then, but not that much. So he got $25 million that he gave to USAID and said, you use this to help the Vietnamese victims of Agent Orange. Well, USAID just pissed it away. They don't like to be told how to spend their money. And they said, well, we'll do studies here, we'll do studies there. Project Renew asked for some of that money and put together a really nice proposal. And they was like, no, you don't get it. And there's more to that story than that, but that money's gone. When the next batch of money comes around, we don't know. We don't know when that will be. But $25 million is nothing. Yes.
So the VA is a civilian agency.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any information sharing between research or information about Agent Orange, diseases, treatment, etc., and health agencies in Vietnam?
There's a good amount of research having been done by the VA and by other organizations, and it's all public information, so the Vietnamese have access to it.
I was going to say, it's the Institute of Medicine, the National Academies of Science, it was when the Agent Orange Act was passed, so for about every 2 years, for 12 years, they had the responsibility for collecting studies that were done internationally that might have been related to dioxin, whether it was industrial explosions, whatever else it was. And the National Academies of Medicine took the results. They had a committee that was put together specifically to analyze the data and to analyze these studies, and then to make recommendations to the VA for which illnesses they thought were mostly correlated with the Agent Orange dioxin. It gets into a lot of detail in terms of whether there is a close association or not particularly close association. So to date, there are about 18 different illnesses that have been approved, and the VA calls these presumptive illnesses. They won't say that there is a direct correlation, but if you served and you were in country during this 10-15 year period and you get one of these illnesses, then you will receive services. What has happened recently over the years is that other countries have been doing these studies. The most recent ones, which were pretty incredible, that were done in South Korea, because they were able to actually track troop movements, and they saw additional correlation between illnesses like bladder cancer and hypothyroidism. Those have yet to be approved by the VA. And the major illness that we know about is high blood pressure, where they're high blood pressure. The studies were done on the Army Chemical Corps guys that handled the chemicals directly and did the spraying around the bases. And there was no question that they found there was a relationship over the years between those men that were responsible for handling, for spraying, etc., and high blood pressure, and that there was a higher mortality. However, the VA didn't accept those studies, went ahead and did their own, and about 2 years ago said, yes, there is a correlation, and it's not just the aging process, but there is a correlation between exposure and development of high blood pressure. It still is not one of the recognized illnesses by the VA.
Costs too much money.
It costs too much, there's too many people involved.
Yes.
Have there been changes in terms of financial support under this new administration? No, it
No.
continues to,
Well, Obama promised to clean up Vietnam,
yeah.
and Trump has promised to clean up Vietnam, but neither of them have made any. There's never been a move to actually fund it. So, and that'll. I'm saying I think that'll happen. It's just going to take another few years. That'll happen, and then the U.S. is going to hope to be able to walk away from the other issues, these much smaller hotspots, but still have a tremendously bad effect on people right there in those areas.
Poorest people.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you share with us what are some of your top 3 things that you'd like
Ah.
us to consider?
Good transition. So, Barbara Lee has put up a bill for us. Actually, this is the 4th time it's gone up. It's called the HR 334, Victims of Agent Orange Relief Act of 2015. So it's in the current Congress, and she'll do it again, I'm sure, next year when we enter the new Congress. It has 5 elements. Clean up all the dioxin in Vietnam. Assistance to the public health system in Vietnam for the victims of Agent Orange, specifically. Those people who are handicapped because or sick because of their exposure or their parents' exposure or their grandparents' exposure. Assistance to the children of male U.S. veterans, because as Susan pointed out, only spina bifida is recognized, even though for the children of female veterans, in which there's only 6,000, 8,000, neural tube defects, any neural tube defect is counted. And spina bifida is just one piece of a neural tube defects. It fits in that category. And there's really no reason why neural tube defects should not also be counted. So it's essentially, the bill says, give the children of male veterans the same consideration that the children of women veterans get. Okay? The 4th element is to do a public health study of the Vietnamese Americans. That whole population, if U.S. veterans and their kids are sick and the Vietnamese are sick, it makes sense that there's some former ARVNs, or their kids who are sick, right? Or the Viet Q, whether they were ARVNs or not, that were out in the countryside and got exposed to this stuff. That's the 4th element. And the 5th element, and actually one of my favorites, even though all of them, it's not the most important, but it's sort of telling. The Institute of Medicine has done these Agent Orange updates every 2 years since 1994. Always, part of their charge is to tell the VA what research they should do. And they don't ever do it. And one of the things they say is, look at your own data. And the VA has never looked at its own data. So there's an Agent Orange registry, for example, that about 700,000 veterans have gone in and gotten a full physical. And once they're done, all of that information just goes into a file in the file cabinet, and has never been aggregated and never been looked at. It's just in a file cabinet someplace. It's not even digitized. So it would take an effort for the VA to say, let's look at all of our veterans who've gone through the Agent Orange and see what we find. You know, they haven't even looked at it. Not only that, one of the questions they don't ask is, how are your kids?
That's right.
You know, they've never asked that question. So the 5th element is to do the research that the Institute of Medicine says you do and you don't want to do. You know, and that's to the VA. So that's the bill. It's only 12 pages long. It's a good summary of what we think are the biggest issues related to Agent Orange. There's a few others.
What's the price limit?
Huh?
What's the price on it?
Well, it has no price. I mean, I'll give you what I think it's gonna cost. $10 billion over 10 years. You know, and they could,
Billion or million?
10 billion over 10, $1 billion a year for 10 years. You know, that's all.
And I think what's.
And when you have a Department of Defense budget, which is 670 billion this year,
Yeah.
what's that mean?
Yeah.
It's 1 billion out of 670 for 10 years. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, one of the really important issues I think to remember, as Paul mentioned earlier, is that the parents of these children are aging, and
Right.
who will take care of the children once they die?
And
They will need,
I'm sorry.
no,
So Vietnam has put together a whole series, the VAVA and the Vietnamese government and the MOLISA, Ministry of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs, have put together a whole series of what they call peace villages that where these kids either abandoned or parents have died or can't take care of them any longer, or just cannot be taken care of. That they're holding positions for these people. They're poorly funded. We've seen, we saw the
Right.
Vietnam Friendship Village. That's a very good one. I've seen a couple of others, and it's depressing. They just don't have any funding. They don't have sufficient funding to take good care of these people who are severely disabled, such as some of these.
So is that your second? She said your top three is funding for FAVA
Yeah,
and other agencies?
it's for the U.S. to provide funding to the public health system in Vietnam aimed at Agent Orange victims. That's the second one. It's clean up the mess so you don't make any more of these
Number
kids.
2 is, what was number 2 then?
Assistance to the Vietnamese public health system.
Versus the bill.
These are the
Those
five
are
elements
the
of the
five
bill.
These are the 5 elements of the bill. So it's not 3, it's 5, which makes it for a complicated bill. It's a problem. So, all right, well, I'll go through it one more time. Clean up the mess, the dioxin, right? Assistance to the public health system in Vietnam. Assistance to the children of male Vietnam veterans to give them the same benefits, the same consideration that female U.S. veterans get. Okay. 4 is to do a public health study of the Vietnamese Americans, the Viet Q, they're called. Because we don't know what their health system is, and so we can't say, oh, you give them $1 billion. We don't know what that's never been done. So we don't know what their health system is. And very many of the
Just go on with you,
South
Tom.
Vietnamese, former South Vietnamese, they say this is just a communist conspiracy, which nobody believes, but they're so angry at having lost the war that they don't want to accept that their kid who's messed up is messed up because of Agent Orange. But that's public health study would be very effective. That's 4, and the 5th one is to stop with this don't look, don't find attitude that the VA has. Look at your own data. Okay?
So all when they collected all the surplus dioxin and sent it to the Shelly Islands, so how much did we pay the company? We paid them. We paid the dioxin companies for that stuff that we destroyed.
Well, there's okay.
Yeah.
You want to hear a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I want to know how much has the companies contributed to this mess?
Nothing.
Nothing. That's right.
Zero. So in 1979, Paul Rudishan, who was a Vietnam veteran who had fatal cancer,
Gastric cancer.
gastrointestinal, sued the chemical companies, Dow and Monsanto specifically, because of his cancer, saying that they were killing him. It became a class action lawsuit, and in 1984, 5 years later, he was dead. But 5 years later, it was settled out of court by Wolf. What was his name? No, the judge. Weinstein. Thank you. Judge Weinstein got the chemical companies, Dow and Monsanto, to agree to pay $180 million to those people, U.S. veterans who were sick because of Agent Orange. In order to get that, you had to file within a certain period of time, 18 months or something like that, and a claim. And the most any veteran got was about $5,400 in a cash payment. Didn't fix your problems, didn't give you VA benefits and so forth. But, and that money was gone within 10 years.
And those companies lied because they said it doesn't
Right.
hurt people. We're animals.
Well, I think they recognize that it, well, I don't know. I don't know exactly
They
what
did
they're.
it right, and the reason that they settled the case was
Out of
because
court.
They didn't want the data and all of the studies and information to be held in open court, so that there were settlements
Right.
and the information never became public.
And some veterans thought, that sounds pretty good, but the lawyers said, hey, we could make 40% of $180 million, let's go, you know? And so, but Weinstein promised the chemical companies that was the only time they would ever have to pay. You want out of this, we will keep you out of it, okay? So that money was gone within a few years. In 2004, there was two other veterans groups. There were two other lawsuits by veterans who had not, against the chemical companies, who had not been sick in 1984 and therefore did not file because they weren't sick a few years before. And they're saying, well, we're sick now, why can't we get compensation? In addition, in Vietnam, which we then had normal relations with, VAVA formed, Vietnamese Association of Victims of Agent Orange, who we met with General Ring up and we met with their people in Hue. They formed an organization, there's just 10 of them initially, and they filed a class action lawsuit at about the same time that the two U.S. veterans did, charging the 38 chemical companies with product deficiencies, and I mean, there were a bunch of legal terms under which they filed, but it was, and they found that 38 chemical companies made this crap. It wasn't just Dow and Monsanto. Every chemical company you can name, and I have a list here if you want me to go through it, were charged in that suit. But Weinstein, when he settled this case in '84, said any further Agent Orange claim cases against the chemical companies come back to my court. And apparently he was able to get away with that. So those 3 cases went back to him, and he hemmed and hawed a little bit and then threw them out. The cases were then sent to the appeals court, they threw them out. And they were sent to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in 2009, 5 years later, refused to hear it. And so that completely wipes out any ability of U.S. or the Vietnamese to sue the chemical companies and get another damn nickel. The chemical companies said, well, hey, we were just government contractors. Their argument
the
was
government.
they have under you can't sue the government. And they were saying, well, we were just contractors to the government. You can't sue us either. That was their argument. And it was upheld. 1 second. And so there are no further recourse to sue the U.S. government. To sue the chemical companies in the U.S. Now there is one lawsuit in France by a Vietnamese, Franco-Vietnamese, how do you say that? A Vietnamese woman who lives in France, and she sued the chemical companies. And I don't know where that is at this point. I think it has a slim chance of getting anywhere, but she's still at it. But it's in a French court. In an American court, there's no even reason to try. Yeah.
It's a lost cause.
The lost cause against the chemical companies.
Paul,
And after that, 2009, when we were our group that we worked with, were working to assist that legal case. When that went belly up, then we switched to the legislative branch, and that's why we have these. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just briefly, I know everyone's ready for dinner, but
Yeah.
you've given us one thing of top 3. One is the bill, which is, I understand is really important, but
Okay.
if over the next 5 days, you can think of specific items that VFP 160
Yes.
can consider regarding this.
Yes.
In
Thank you.
addition to the bill.
Well, in terms of the bill, there's a little bit more about the bill. We need co-sponsors. We got 26 co-sponsors, which is just outrageous. It's not enough. But if you go to your congressman and say, I want you to co-sponsor that bill, and you make the point, and then you make it again, and then you make it again, it's a project you can take on that has a definite goal. You want your congressman in your district to support that bill. It's Barbara Lee's Bill 334. And once you do that, you can say, I've done something to help the Vietnamese,
With orange cards.
And we have orange cards. So it lists the 5 points of the bill. It urges the congressman, and then you sign it. and then you get it back to us.
Yes.
And we will aggregate those and send them to you if you have a meeting with the congressman. And you take 50 cards and say, these are your constituents who support this bill.
Well, the European courts are taking this very seriously, the French courts.
Yeah.
When the hearing opened in Paris, I think it was in Paris, 29 legal teams came in from all around the world in hearing.
Wow.
29 different law firms representing the chemical companies.
The chemical company.
Yeah. They take it very seriously. They think that Europe is going to be very different from the U.S. courts.
It's 7:04, so we should probably, I'm happy to answer questions. I think Mike had a question.
Well, you're right, everybody wants to, but to shift the whole issue, the beat goes on. I started arguing with one of my colleagues about depleted uranium.
Yeah, right.
He's also a reserve colonel, but his brother happens to be a high-ranking, approving chemist at the Department of Defense.
Right.
He sends me this 20-page memo on how depleted uranium is absolutely safe. So the beat just goes on.
Well, let me just say one thing about that. The atomic veterans tried to get some kind of justice for their exposure all throughout the 50s. They mostly died without anything. Vietnam veterans fought and fought and fought, and they've got a pretty good deal. It's far from perfect, but there's these presumptions that if you were in Vietnam and you have diabetes, you can get assistance. But we have to take this to Vietnam. We have to recognize that this is a cost of war. And depleted uranium is the next fight, and the burn pits is another fight. There's lots of this. The United States government, how should I say this, shits everywhere. And doesn't clean up its mess. And in terms of unexploded ordnance, in terms of Agent Orange, this is the time to make it right here, and that set the precedence, one hopes, for what happens when Iraq becomes peaceful. And we have depleted uranium oxide. It's not depleted, it's radioactive as hell. And it's a toxic chemical all over southern Iraq. And there will be a time when that needs to be dealt with too.
My aunt unfortunately died of cancer from exposure to radiation at Hiroshima. She was in the Marines and sent into Hiroshima. Of course, no year, nothing, just closed like that. Years later, she had a horrible death. And the government finally acknowledged it 10 years after she died.
Right. So I think that
one question. Do you have any treaty, does the United States have any treaty with Vietnam that would enable somebody to sue in a Vietnamese court, win, and form a treaty obligation that the United States would be held accountable?
You're outside my realm. It's beyond my pay grade.
No, but in fact, the whole issue in TPP is that you weren't allowed to sue those companies. I know it's not in effect right now, but no, you can't.